So I'm actually on a trip with my friends and we're driving 3 cars here. We have the Evo 6.5 Tommi Makinen edition and my FD2 over there, and then a 997.1 C2S. We call it Club Sport because it has everything stripped out. So 3 cars, completely different setup on each car. We have a front engine front wheel drive, front engine all wheel drive, and a rear engine rear wheel drive car. This is my first time driving the Tommi Makinen, so I want to see what the main difference is between this car and my Civic on the left side over there. And this will make for an interesting video because we hired a photographer and these guys are nuts. Look at them, they're riding on a motorbike and taking photos. So, first impressions of this car. I prefer the inputs of the FD2 more. This car has a very light steering, but man, it's so responsive. And the grip is immense. There's no doubt that from a capability standpoint, this car is much more capable than my FD2. It has more grip, stronger brakes too, apparently. I would think that the braking would be quite similar, but somehow this car brakes better. And then there's the power. Power on this car being turbocharged, slightly tuned as well, probably making 300 horsepower. And there's gobs of torque everywhere. Look at, it just leans into the corner. Good amount of body movement, very composed. It feels almost light on its feet, as if it's kind of tiptoeing. That might not be a good thing, but once you learn to lean on this car, to trust it, you'll soon know that the limits are very high, much higher than the Civic. The Civic will understeer way before this car starts to lose any composure. There's our cameraman. Holy shit! He's not even... Wow, I feel like I should not condone this. This guy's fucking nuts. He's not wearing a helmet. He's holding a GoPro and he's facing backwards. He must put a lot of trust in the rider. And I took a photo of the bike. If you look at the tires, he's running slicks. So if it touches a wet patch of road, man, they're gone. Wow, this car is immensely capable. Brakes with so much confidence. I'm barely pushing on the brakes that hard and it just brakes hard. I'm only applying like maybe 40% force. It would be interesting to hop into the Civic after this drive and realize what the difference is. But I can probably guess that trying to keep up with this 997 in the Civic would be rather tough. I would have to use a lot of revs. Whereas in the Evo, I'm just using 4,000 to 5,000 RPM. But that, to be honest, that's where most of the torque is for this car. One other thing is, this engine is so smooth and it's kind of quiet that I can't really hear the red line. So I might be getting close to red line. The engine will still be pulling hard and I have to look down at the rev counter to know when to shift. In the Civic, it's completely intuitive when to shift. I don't need to look at the tach. That is one of the downsides of a turbocharged engine. But the upsides, I think you guys know the upsides. It's the gobs of torque. Easily keeping up with the 997. What was that guy doing? Wheel towing is not that difficult in this car, but in the Civic it's miles better. It's way more responsive and the pedal placement is better also. I sense a little bit braking oversteer in this car. Now we're talking. Some better roads. And unfortunately, this is where I have to tell you guys that my GoPro started acting up and I lost over half of the footage that I filmed. So I lost the Evo driving in the mountains, and I lost the moment that I hopped back into the FD2 to give you a direct comparison. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'll show you guys a few more footage of me driving the Evo later in the day, and then I will show you guys footage of me driving the Civic Type R during the next day without commentary, and I'll try to add some of my own voiced commentary on top of the footage. I need to try this car again. This time I need to decide if we are keeping the car or getting rid of it, or should I say flip it. Driving on high boost, it's much more fun. It keeps pulling all the way, but the knock is more significant. Oh, but the way it pulls out a corner, going uphill is, wow, it demolishes the uphill corners. Boost is another beast. Is a little bit concerning. Wow, look at that view. There they are. Ooh. Man, that was such a good drive. I'm second thinking. Maybe we shouldn't sell this car. Okay, now I'm gonna swap cars. Get into the Civic. And then we'll compare. Okay, so now I'm driving the Civic, and this is a high-speed section. When compared to the Evo, One thing I do notice is that the Civic actually has a much longer wheelbase. I would say it's about almost a foot longer. So on these high speed sections, the Civic to me feels more stable. And the stability of the chassis is actually not just noticeable by the wheelbase of the car. You actually feel it throughout the suspension of the car. Somehow this car just feels more tight and feels more grown up. When driving this car, I feel like, oh, he nearly spun there. Good catch, good catch. When driving this car, I feel like this is a car that I can drive to work, I can drive in town. It just suits my daily life more compared to the Evo. The Evo has a clunkiness to it. I don't know how you describe it, but somehow the Civic just feels better built. The Evo, I'm not sure if it's because of that particular car, but I've driven a few. They all have this clunkiness to it. But this Civic is just so tight, and the tightness can be felt even in all the inputs. So the steering, the gear shift, the clutch, the throttle, the brakes, there's just this tightness to it. If I were to compare it to like a German car maker, this Civic has similar qualities to a Porsche. Whereas maybe that Evo is closer to maybe a BMW or something like that. There is that gap in terms of the tightness. Next, the biggest difference between the Evo and the Civic in terms of the engine is the power delivery. This Civic, as you can see, I'm revving the nuts out of it, lacks power. But every gear shift in this car is like a dopamine hit. Every time you shift, you just get this hit of dopamine because the controls are so crispy. And the way that the engine responds is so crispy and fizzy. To me, it's a much more addictive driving experience. I enjoy driving this car much more, despite it being slower. But look, I'm having to really push this car, really rev it out, where the Evo gives its best performance at around 6,000 RPM. It starts to drop after that. This car, man, it keeps on going all the way to 9,000. When you feel like there's not enough torque, just shift down. Yeah. When you're in fourth gear, just shift down to third and the engine will sing for you. Just listen to that. It's so zingy and so fizzy. The whole experience is just visceral compared to the Evo. Somehow I think Honda just has a better understanding of what a good driver's car should feel like. Ooh, money shift. Luckily, all the internals of this engine is forged. Thanks to my friend who blew this engine up before. Now it's forged and it's able to survive some amount of money shifting. Yeah. So back to what I was saying. I mean, just look at the gear shifts. Every time you shift, it makes a clink. It's just so much more satisfying than the Evo. The Evo has like this agricultural feel to it, whereas this feels like a fine piece of machinery. After this drive, I think it's clear to me that the Civic is the car that I prefer. And actually, after this drive, I spoke to my friends. The Evo was actually shared between the three of us that went on this trip. But I told them that I want out. I sold my shares, my 1/3 shares of the Evo, back to my two friends. And it's because
GoPro keeps falling.
I realized how good this Civic is. Despite it not being as fast, despite it not having the same limits as the Evo. I feel like the Evo has a higher grip limit. But this car to me is just pure heaven to drive. It is what a driver's car should be. Just man and machine. I do apologize that I keep touching my head because the GoPro being mounted on my cap, because I'm driving so fast as well, kept on slipping down and blocking my vision. So every now and then I keep having to adjust the hat, and that's causing me to sort of drive with a bit more anger, and at some points I even lose concentration, and like you saw just now, I made the wrong shift. But if I were to drive without filming, it would just be meditation. This is pure driving heaven for me. Look at how easy it is to heel toe this car. Rev matching is one of the best on this car. Of all the cars that I've driven, this car rewards you so well every time you rev match. It is near impossible to mess up your heel toe in this car. Look at what I'm wearing. I'm wearing flip-flops. Even when wearing flip-flops, it's so easy to drive this car to perfection. And when you're cornering hard, you know exactly where the limits are. You know when the tires will start screeching. And so you can really carve out any line that you like, as long as you're not being too silly. The only complaint about my specific car that I have would be the brakes. Somehow, I don't know why, the brakes on my car just feel a little bit soggy. I've already done what I can. I changed the brake discs, the brake pads, bled the brake fluid. I did everything I can. It's better, but it's just somehow not as good as the Evo. So that's an ongoing project for me that I hope I can improve on this car. And the other thing that perhaps I would think of improving would be the front end grip. Because although I did say that the car reaches the limit very predictably, but I'm not a big fan of understeer, and I hope this car can have a more neutral and perhaps even a slightly tail-happy characteristic. I think that would make this car much more fun on track, but maybe on the road it could be a bit scary. So what I would probably do next to this car is somehow get the front camber to be a bit more aggressive. And that can be done by getting aftermarket lower wishbones. And hopefully with that, this car would just be near perfect. It never bothers me that this car is actually front-wheel drive. It doesn't matter. I have the same amount of fun driving a rear-wheel drive car versus when I drive this car. just doesn't matter. A good car is a good car. And this K20 engine, this 9,000 RPM engine, it's really growing on me. Like the way it buzzes and fizzes and just sound like a bunch of angry wasps. So addictive, so satisfying to listen to. And then there's the gearbox. How can I not talk about the gearbox? This short ratio 6-speed gearbox is just pure joy to use. All the gear ratios are perfectly spaced. When you shift in this car, you can really get into the rhythm. It's just like playing drums. You know exactly when the shift points are. When comparing to the Evo, the gearing on the Evo is just not as linearly spaced as this. And combine that with the fact that on the Civic, the gears are so short. You can see on some corners, when I'm in third gear, I'm only reaching like 100 plus kph. And this car would just scream to redline at every opportunity you get. The pairing of this gearbox and the K20 engine is just something that you have to experience in order to fully understand what I'm trying to say. So I'll just let the footage roll until the end, but I've already stated my conclusion, and that is, at the end of the day, despite the legendary status of the Evo Tommi Makinen edition, the car that people rave about.
That was a scary turn.
In my opinion, this is the better driver's car. The Civic FD2. Probably my top 3 favorite cars of all time.
Whew, that was fun.